Hello and welcome back to our Cyber Inside Out podcast, now being season 2. This episode is focusing on passwords, and today we have Catherine Brabander helping us out. Hello, Catherine.
Hi, Chris. So yes, I am the Cyber Protect Officer from Surrey and Sussex Cybercrime Unit. And basically what that means is I work across both Surrey and Sussex, helping out with victims of cybercrime, giving them protect advice to help them from being protected from cyber threats in the future, working with SMEs across both Surrey and Sussex to help them boost their cyber resilience, and also doing a lot of community work, just trying to get the cyber protect message out across both Surrey and Sussex to kind of, all demographics, covering public all the way through to SMEs.
That definitely sounds like a very, very busy role.
It is very busy, very rewarding, and covers lots, but yeah, really, really interesting stuff.
Good stuff. So we'll start off with questions today then, and I guess the most important one is why are we actually having this session? What's the current threats we are seeing involving passwords, Catherine?
So I think kind of stripping it back, the reason why we're having this session is passwords really are kind of a basic when it comes to cybersecurity, and kind of a first thing I guess we should be looking at when it comes to what we can do to protect ourselves. Sometimes I think it can be easy to kind of go massively technical, but actually passwords are quite a simple thing that we can do to be protecting our online accounts within personal lives and business lives. And I think within relation to a current threat, what we're seeing involving passwords, we see so many phishing attacks that are kind of increasing, they're not going away, and people kind of actively providing their usernames and passwords to threat actors. We're seeing data breaches where passwords are being swept up and people's online accounts are being compromised. So it's very much still a problem which we're seeing today. And even the likes of things like common passwords being used is something which we're still trying to tackle. So the threat is still quite big to both individuals and on a business scale, whether you're SME or a large business. So I think the threat is still quite high, and that's why we're having this session today. It's something which needs to be spoken about.
I mean, it all does sound very scary to those that, I guess, are scared of computers because it just makes you nervous, and they find technical jargon a little bit uneasy. I know you mentioned things like phishing, so that is where someone's trying to scam you by email. Threat actors, I guess we could call them hackers, we could call them suspects or criminals, is people that are just misusing computers for their own good. But computers don't have to be overly scary. And what I could say is, in relation to your passwords, there's really some quick and easy fixes on how to keep yourself or make yourself safer. But what you mentioned about cyber attackers and threat actors, but what if an attacker gets hold of your password? What do you usually see happens next?
Well, in my role, kind of specifically, what we tend to see is if someone obtains your passwords through a variety of different means, usually that person will then try and access the account that's linked to that password. So it could be that you have a Gmail email address and a password. Maybe their first point of call will be to try your Gmail account, and then potentially try other accounts that are associated with that. We do see these phishing emails and text messages sometimes where people will email saying we have your password and maybe try and scare people into providing more information, and again using that kind of that persuasive technique to try and to get more information out of people. So it could be that your account is hacked into, it could be that you're contacted in that kind of threatening way with your password, which could have been obtained from somewhere. Again, trying to get more information out of you that way, and potentially again causing a bit more damage. So that's what I tend to see mostly, within kind of a protect role. And then also you obviously have on a business scale, sometimes if accounts are compromised and hacked into, I guess you could end up in a situation where more information is kind of extracted and data breaches, or you could be putting viruses onto computers and things like that. So there's quite a big scope, I think, of what can happen, depending on your whether you're an individual or in a business setting.
Yeah, it makes sense that. And I'm guessing once they've got hold of your, or how they get hold of your passwords is things like data breaches and data compromises. I know you mentioned that. So you trust your personal details with other companies, and if other companies just let the side down and hackers have got in, your passwords could be put onto the internet for all to see. Criminals would often find these areas of where the passwords are stored, and then they would just use, some cases, automatic programs just to test whether that password is still active, and then they get into your accounts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, you could be really, really careful with your own information, but there's always going to be that slight risk that people who you shop with or people who you have online accounts with, they have a level of responsibility too with your information. So you could be really, really hot on your cybersecurity and really, really hot on your passwords and keeping those nice and safe. But there's always going to be that slight risk if a company has a data breach and your information is included in that. Unfortunately, like you said, there are spaces where that information can be potentially collected by cyber criminals and hackers and pick those things up. And there is a way that your accounts could be potentially hacked into through a different means, even if you are really, really safe and really, really secure in what you're doing and your own kind of personal security. So there are different ways it can happen, definitely.
I think one of the golden rules I picked up over my time in cybersecurity is that you should always keep a separate password for your main email account and then use a different password for maybe a shopping accounts or recreational accounts, things like Sainsbury's, eBay, Amazon. Have a different password for your main email account. So if one of those private companies that you use has a data breach, it's not the same as your email account. Because one of the things which I know can happen is that if it is the same password for your email account, then I would end up having complete control of your email account. And then I can go to all of the other accounts and just click the I forgot my password link. And that then gets sent back to the email account I'm in charge with. And it will probably take me about 15 minutes to kick you out all of those other accounts by resetting your password slowly and surely. Is that,
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
see that quite often these days?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it is, we do see people that use similar passwords for emails and, like you said, kind of maybe other online accounts like shopping and things like that. So whether you have the exact same email password or potentially like a slight variation, but like you said, it's really, really important we're having those really, really strong passwords for our emails because they hold so much information about, marketing, receipts from online shopping, all of our online platforms. So whether it be your banking, your social media, and if you're able to access that, it's just almost like a big shop of where you can go around and jump between all these different accounts and just try that password in the hope that it will work, or try a variation of that password. So we do see that a lot. We do see where people maybe have a Facebook compromise, and then they'll also find that their PayPal, their Netflix, and their Amazon accounts are also hacked into. And it could be because they're just using that same password, like you said, and those password resets, which stop you from getting back into that account. So it's definitely something which we see and something which should be kind of highlighted as a risk as well.
So we've used the phrase strong password and good password quite a lot already. What is one?
So we follow the National Cybersecurity Centre's guidance, and that is that you use a combination of three random words. And the reason being that is kind of recommended is that the likelihood of somebody guessing three random words that you pick in a combination that you pick is very, very unlikely. And then you can bulk those out. So you can use uppercase and lowercase, you can use special characters, and you can use numbers to bulk that out as well. And the recommendation is kind of 12 characters or thereabouts. And we always say to people, try and avoid using things that can be guessed or linked back to you. So your really common things like your favorite pet's name, your where you went to school, your favorite football team, your mother's maiden name, your maiden name, anything which could be potentially guessed or linked back to you, we always say is a bit of a no-go. And just sticking to those three random words and three words that you can remember, but just nothing that can be linked back to you directly or could potentially be guessed based on your social media or any information that's on the internet about you or things that your friends and family might know about you as well. So the kind of gold ticket to it is three random words, and then you can bulk that out with kind of extra bits to boost that as well.
Like it. And I know some people have heard and read on the news and the internet password managers. Um, I know the National Cybersecurity Centre advocates the use of password managers, and they feature on your smartphones. Sometimes they call it the password vault, or they exist in browsers where you can go onto a particular website for the first time, you type in a password, and the browser would actually suggest a longer, stronger password. And they're usually made up of a horrendously long amount of characters, uppercase, lowercase, symbols, numbers. It's not the sort of password that I guess the average human brain could remember, repeat, and spell. But those password managers are particularly good. They store it on your device in an encrypted form. So that's why we'd always say that on your phone, when you're not using it, it should auto lock. because that's when the phone goes into an encryption mode. If you don't lock your phone, then literally anyone could pick it up and just access anything from your emails, photos, and passwords. So always have your devices locked when you're not using them. That includes devices and desktops. When you're sat in the office and you get up and walk away and go to the toilet, for instance, lock your machines. Otherwise, they could get access to all your passwords. I would say password managers, they are brilliant. Some people don't trust them because it's in the cloud, isn't it? Or it's on the device. People like to trust stuff when it's in their head, or some people still like the use of post-it notes. It's
Mhm.
what's proportionate and comfortable to you. Do you hear many people using password managers, Catherine?
I do, yeah, and I think, like you said, there is a bit of a mixed kind of response on whether to use them or not. And I think one of the key things here is people say, well, what if my password manager is hacked into? And then you basically have a list of your passwords. And I always say to people, like with your email, so kind of the same sort of stance is that if you choose to use a password manager, you want to be making sure you use that really, really strong 3 random word password to secure that. And then also your two-factor authentication, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a bit more detail. But just making sure that you're really, really securing that account, because the last thing you would want would to be obviously your password manager to be hacked into, because that's where you store your passwords. So it's kind of like you said, it's proportionate. And like you said, it's difficult to remember these really long, complex passwords, and equally, it's difficult to remember lots of 3 random word passwords. There's only so many, things you can store in your mind, and you don't want to go through a cycle of having to keep resetting your password, because it almost defeats the point of making it nice and simple. So they are a really good way of storing your passwords nice and safely. It makes it, like you said, it's almost like a vault where you can keep things nice and safe. So we would always suggest that you do that over post-it notes and writing things down in a book that could potentially get lost, or if you don't have a lock on your phone and you write it in your notes, and someone could pick that up if it goes missing. So it's all proportionate, but I do think they're a really good resource, and we do see people that find them really, really useful as well.
So for those business owners out there, we've spoke about, I guess, encouraging staff to have stronger and better passwords. There's a framework out there called Cyber Essentials, and that mandates that passwords should be secured with something called 2FA, which is two-factor authentication. For those business owners out there that would like to encourage their staff to use better and stronger passwords, there's a framework which the UK government is pushing out called Cyber Essentials. But that mandates that if you have 2FA enabled, which is two-factor authentication, then your password length only needs to be 8 characters or more. But if you don't have 2FA enabled or turned on, the password length needs to be 12 characters or more. So it would seem sensible to us that you'd all just operate at a password length of 12 characters or more. Now, what is 2FA and why is that really helpful for passwords? Catherine, go for it.
So as you mentioned, 2FA, two-factor authentication, to basically strip it back, is basically when you have a second factor which will confirm who you are claiming to be when you log into an account or a platform or a device or an app or anything along those lines. So it's also, people may more commonly know it as when you receive a text message code to your phone. It's normally about 6 digits, and you will try and log into an account, and it will send you a 6-digit code to your device of your choice, to confirm who you are, confirm that you are trying to log into that account, and you pop in the code, and then off you go. There are also kind of alternatives, so you can use authenticator apps, which do the same thing. They'll produce that 6-digit code, but you can increase the security by using like a Face ID or a fingerprint to get into that, or a password. So it's just ensuring that you are the person who you're claiming to be when you log into these accounts. And it's a really, like I mentioned at the beginning about passwords being a really easy and free way of enhancing our security. 2FA is exactly the same. It's something that most online platforms will now offer in some form, and it's just that extra layer of security to help prevent those hackers getting into your accounts. Even if they have your password, it means that code will go to you and not to them, and that will stop them from accessing your accounts.
And in most cases, those services are all free because it is an authenticator app which you can download for free from quite a few of the big manufacturers. Google and Microsoft offer them. Or if you choose to use the text message method, where you'll receive a message shortly after you try and log into a site, the 6-digit code is only sent to you, and you enter it into the website, and then you're away. So if you, I guess, wake up in the morning and you find a text message on your phone saying, here is your 6-digit code, and you know that you didn't request that, What sort of alarm bells would that ring for you, Catherine?
So we see this a lot, especially in my protect role. So the alarm bells for me would be that somebody is trying to access my account and potentially has my password. So it gives you that heads up if someone is trying to access an account and you know it's not you. So like you said, if you wake up in the morning and see that you received a text from Facebook, we'll use as an example, saying here's your 6-digit code, please enter to log into your account, and you know that you've been fast asleep in bed and that wasn't you, it gives you the heads up that you know somebody is potentially trying to access your account. And I would always suggest that the first thing you immediately do is go into your account and change your password, and equally set up that 2FA if you haven't got it. So we always see quite frequently, especially in my role, is unfortunately if people don't have the 2FA set up, and someone's able to access their account if they have their password. If the hacker then sets up 2FA to their own device, when the owner of that account then tries to redeem the account and tries to log in, the code will go to the hacker and not to their own device. So I always say to people, it's really, really important that you have this 2FA set up and don't just kind of wait for something to go wrong until you decide to turn it on. So I think it works really well in kind of 3 different ways, in the sense that you are just adding that extra layer of security to your account. It gives you that heads up if somebody's trying to access your account, and you know it's not you. And equally, you want to stop that kind of issue arising if you don't have it set up and somebody sets it up on their behalf. And then obviously it's difficult then for you to get access back to your account. So I always say to people it works in kind of 3 different ways. But like you mentioned, it always also gives you that heads up if someone's trying to access your account. You need to be looking at changing your password, and potentially thinking about how that's been picked up, and looking at maybe, do you need to do a bit more, I guess, research into how your password potentially has been picked up, or if again you're using that common password, and if you need to change that too.
Yeah, the key there is if you didn't have 2FA turned on, they would have been into your account by now, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we talked about notification. There's a couple of reasons that if these days we're encouraging you to keep your password simply for as long as possible, and you only change it for those 2 reasons. One, if you know you've been compromised, so you've typed in your password and someone's watched you do it, or you've written it down somewhere and someone's managed to find that area where you've written it down and they now know it, or you've been notified, which could be anything from a data breach notification company to the company that you're actually a customer of, or if you get that random 2FA notification come through to your phone. These are all key things that would prompt me to change my password, because someone's telling me your password is compromised. And if you don't have access to those things, there is a free service actually out there, Have I Been Pwned? You can put your email address, you can put your phone number in there, and if any of that data is found on the internet, there will be a record of it. So if you register for that service, it is a free service. Ultimately, you'll get a notification at any time when your details are seen online. As a business owner, you can also register your company, your domain, your entity, and it can look after all of your staff in one fell swoop. And effectively, the notification email will come through to the security officer of the company, or if you're a small business owner, you can elect or choose for that to be you. And it will list off how many of your staff's details have been found in data breaches. They, sadly, I guess, they come out all too frequently these days. Quite a few companies around the world are involved in data breaches, but knowledge is power. And I guess if you have access to that information, you can do something about it when you see it. Most of the time, you change your password and it will keep you safe again. And more importantly, you're never allowed to use that password again, because it's something called password recycling. So you can't use the same password ever again once it's compromised, because it's always researchable on the internet. Certainly, when we talked about humans, I know us humans always try and break things and take shortcuts. But if, for instance, you chose a password or password 1 in January, and you may have had a compromise the following month, if you then choose password 2 and then password 3, if you have like a pattern where you keep using the same numbers, it doesn't take a criminal that long to work out that in 4 months' time, add 4 to that, potentially your password is going to be like password 7, and they would guess. They are getting better at guessing these things, which is why Catherine mentioned the National Cybersecurity Centre advice and guidance is the use of 3 random words, because you don't follow a pattern. Is there any other suggestions you'd have, Catherine, on small business owners, and I guess individuals, because we are business owners when we're at home, aren't we? Because we've got our own mortgages, savings accounts, and email accounts, and family finance. On how to keep ourselves safe on passwords and 2FA.
I think a key thing for me is just being aware and being vigilant. And I hear a lot of people say, I never thought this sort of thing would happen to me. Why would people want to access my accounts? Why would people want to access my emails and things like that? And I think it's really, really important, just as a kind of a baseline for people, just to be aware of what is happening, aware of the risks, and be aware that this could actually happen to anybody. I think that's a really, really good starting point. I mean, we've covered loads of really good free resources, and I think sometimes it's difficult to know where to go and almost who to trust and what is legitimate, when we always talk about, be aware of these companies that are pretending to be someone that they're not, and be aware of things that are unauthorized. And we always talk about these things, but sometimes it's difficult, I guess, to know what to follow and to know what advice to trust. So it's really, really good that we cover these things, and like we mentioned, they're free. And when these things are free and accessible, it should be free and accessible for everybody. But I think just being aware of the really simple things that you can do, and like we mentioned at the beginning, this doesn't need to be massively technical. It's just the kind of the basics. And if it was technical, people would switch off and they wouldn't listen, and that's when obviously a problem would arise. But these things are really basic things that people can just do, on their phones, on their laptops, on their computers, in the workplace, having those conversations with staff, trying to build that culture of, constantly speaking about these things. Cybersecurity shouldn't be a tick box annually and then put it in a drawer, because these threats are real and they are frequent. And I know very much, at least I can say from my perspective in my role, these things change on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and it's very important that for that reason we're kind of intertwining this in almost daily practice, and not being lazy with it, being on the front foot, being savvy with it. I mean, we spoke about the 3 random words, and not being lazy with passwords. And I will hold my hands up and say, prior to being in this line of work, I was lazy with passwords, and I'll happily say that, because we're human, like you mentioned, and we all do it. But it's just being aware of what's going on and being aware of that risk. And I think that's a really, really key part for individuals and business owners. And as you mentioned, in our own homes, we are kind of our own managers of our own personal lives. So I think it's really, really important for both sides to kind of have that standpoint, and then look, at the really kind of useful and free things that we've covered so far.
Thank you. And I guess thank you for helping the podcast today. I know our listeners are going to be changing their passwords with their new and better understanding. And for those that are out there, that Catherine looks after Surrey and Sussex, but certainly out of the 43 police forces across the country, if you're unsure and want some extra help and guidance on the world of cyber and cybersecurity, each police force does have a cyber protect officer that specialises in cybersecurity. So they're all accessible, they're all free. You've only got to contact your local police force and they're there to help. It's what the police now do. Cybersecurity is a big problem. Rather like that when you have a burglary or a car theft, police will come round and help out and ensure that you're not going to be a repeat victim of the same thing by giving you helpful guidance and advice. The world of cyber, some people do find it complex, but that's why the Cyber Resilience Centre for the South East is here as well, to help make organisations safer against cyber attacks. And where necessary, we can provide affordable testing services, products and training where needed. So if you want to join us at the South East Cyber Resilience Centre, it's secrc.co.uk for some more information, or jump onto your local police force's website and look up the cybercrime team. We're all here to help. So thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks very much for having me.